First though, we're going to start in Greece. And actually, some really strong words from the Prime Minister there. He says the climate crisis is already here, and Greece is at war. More than 80 wildfires are burning right now. And he says the Mediterranean region would face even greater disasters as a result of climate change. Well, the islands of Rhodes, Corfu, and Evia have been worst hit. Parts of the mainland are on high alert too. Tens of thousands of locals and tourists have been evacuated from danger areas. The European Union has sent firefighter reinforcements to try to help. From Lindos, our correspondent Jenny Hill sent this. It seems like no one was hurt. Fires swept through this resort, not much left behind. Those were once water skis. So much of this island still looks well idyllic, and then you take a few steps and you come across a scene like this. It's still smoldering. That, of course, was someone's livelihood completely destroyed. This is where there were sunbeds just a few days ago. It wasn't just tourists who scrambled to safety. I was crying. It was making me feel terrible. Adissa and her family, who all work in the hotels here, had to get out too. When we met them, they'd only just learned their house had survived the fire. For the tourists, it was a really terrified and bad experience. But from us, I think it's worse because we live here. Everything is burned. Not everything. This hotel, one of the most luxurious in Lindos, escaped damage. But the guests are gone, and much of the surrounding countryside is destroyed. If you have seen the scenery around, it's like a biblical catastrophe. The hotel is a hotel. You will rebuild it, you will repaint it. But the nature outside is the most important thing that we need to check what we're gonna do, because all this is a result of the environmental crisis that we are facing. Fires have raged on, strong winds fanning the flames. It's far too soon to properly assess the damage done here, but on the nearby beach, a business owner had come to take a look. We lost the business. We have a good health and we are hope to fix it again. It's a sign of just how quickly things change. The wind's very strong now and we've been told we need to get out because the fire may be coming towards us. It seems unstoppable. Firefighters are now battling to save more villages from the flames. All those who fled can do is watch and hope. So I was Jenny Hill there talking us through some of the very obvious, human, costs to all this. We're going to take a moment now to look at the environmental and wildlife damage here because of course wildlife particularly hard hit by these fires. No proper on-site assessment is possible yet. It's thought 12 of the area that's burned in Rhodes is a protected area, where animals like European fallow deer live along with many others of course. Let's get a bit more detail into what is happening at Dimitrios Karavellas is Director General of the environmental NGO WWF Greece. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Thank you for having me. Good evening. So we've all seen the terrible pictures of the wildfires. What's the kind of damage that's being done? Well, wildfires are in the Mediterranean ecosystems are quite a common occurrence, and the ecosystems and the Mediterranean have become adapted to wildfires, but the reality is that these wildfires are now more frequent and also more intense. As you already mentioned in your introduction, on the island of Rhodes we see that just over 10%, 12% of the area that's been burned is a protected area. We do know that there's a sizable population of a fallow deer on the island. We don't know at this stage how badly that population has been impacted. We can't actually assess this with on-site visits while the fires are still raging, but it's fair to say that we have had important damage to start with, and it's important to see just what that restoration will look like the day after the forest fires finally are put out at some stage. Are you seeing more of this kind of? I think you said it's obvious, an area that's used to it to some extent, but is this kind of the new normal now? I think we're certainly seeing more intense forest fires, and that's why the fires this scale and this size are now taking on the name of mega fires. And it's not just happening in Greece, it's happening in many other countries throughout the Mediterranean. We heard earlier on that this might be related to the climate crisis, and the Prime Minister said that there's a war on the climate crisis and the war on the forest fires. Well, the reality is that the climate crisis is creating more favorable conditions for these forest fires to break out than to be more intense, but it's not the climate crisis itself that's responsible for these forest fires in the first place, and we shouldn't be thinking of the climate crisis as an excuse for an action or for a business as usual approach. We need to address the climate crisis. This will require very bold climate action. I would urge, for example, the Greek Prime Minister to abandon the plans to drill for oil and gas in the Greek seas, because that's bold climate action that we would require. But I think it also requires us to look at forest fires in a very different way. We just looked at some of the damage being done. What is there anything in a practical sense after the fire is burned through, after it's been put out? We've just been seeing those pictures of devastation. Is there anything that your organization or organizations can actually do? Well, in many cases forests can naturally regenerate, and so one of the things that we need to do is to ensure that we can allow Mother Nature to do its job and allow for these forests to naturally regenerate in those areas that have been burned more than 2 or 3 times. We may have to actually technically reforest these areas on the basis of scientific studies and with the right type of species, because it's important to be respectful of what the ecosystem looked like and what the ecosystem balance is all about. Yes, we can do that. We can also see how we can actually allow for these areas to be natural areas, natural force, rather than having a very important threat in the Mediterranean and in Greece changes in land use. So having, for example, illegal buildings built in places where their force existed in the past. There's a lot to be done in terms of restoration, but I think there's also a lot to be done so that we don't face forest fires like this in the future. And that means more and more prevention. It means actually investing time and energy and resources in ensuring that these forests are actively managed so that by the time when those forest fires occur, because they will be, then the intensity is much less. Okay, we have to leave it there. But of interest, Caravellis, thank you very much for coming on the program. Thank you. Right, I want to go to Rhodes now. We can speak to Amy Walker, who was on holiday with her 2 children and mother in Rhodes when they were caught up in these fires. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Hi, how are you? I'm all right, thank you. How are you, more importantly? What's happening right now? Being better, being worse. We are currently with a volunteer family that took us from the crisis center on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday, sorry. So we're now with a Greek family because there was no accommodation provided by 2. We were in a crisis center after being evacuated from Yanadi Beach at midnight. We were evacuated at 10 p.m. from our hotel via army trucks. What was that moment like when you were first told to get out of the hotel? Could you see the fires close, or was this just a warning from the people in charge of the hotels? No, I went into my mom and said we need to pack a bag and get out. And I went to reception. They said, don't leave. There's power cuts on the island everywhere. You might go south, but then what will you do when you get there? You're safe here. There's food, but 2 hours later there were hundreds of people arriving at our hotel. By 6:30, there was no dinner service in the hotel. They were handing out sandwiches and the evacuees were leaving on coaches. Earlier in the day, we had already packed. We went back to the room and I asked reception about the evacuation. Reception said there would be sirens and we would evacuate via the beach. We thought we would sleep on the beach if we were going to be evacuated. We sat there for some time. The sky was bright red from the flames. It was particularly bad at night. My mom went up to reception and they told us to head to the road and walk south. It was pitch black by then. Army trucks arrived and then the evacuations broke down. We had to dump our luggage and walk down to the beach. It was pitch black on the beach with thousands of people and a few boats. There was no government at this point. We've heard a lot of that, You're staying with the local family now. It was local for local boats that help people get out, and now the generosity, now they're showing you there as well. The locals are doing the work here. I cannot say that enough. Tonight our host Marina has got in from work at 3 p.m. She's a mother to a 2-year-old. She's gone straight to the city to volunteer for 2 hours. Wow, they're doing all the work. They're providing all the goods. They are putting tourists up in their houses. A lady on Sunday morning, a stranger let me go and sleep in her house for 2 hours with my baby because we were sleeping on a tiled floor in a school with cockroaches, whilst the 2 reps stood there and said we can't lie to you but we have no information. We've had no infamous. This was on Sunday morning. We were evacuated. We didn't arrive to a Rhodes town into the school until 5:30 in the morning. Any sign on when you're going to get home? So we're meant to be on a flight home on Wednesday evening. That would have been our flight home normally, right? But there's no evacuation flights from Tule till tomorrow. They're putting on 2 extra flights, but you don't know where you will end up in the UK, and we've got no luggage. So I'm literally in this like this is all I have. And what do I end up in? I'm flying home via EasyJet tomorrow, okay, which we've booked ourselves. Okay to me are useless. Well, listen, good luck getting home. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank all the Greek people indeed. Yeah, that message is heard loud and clear. Amy Walker, thank you so much. Thank you.